Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Achieve Enhanced Cloud Security with Data Loss Prevention. My name is Sascha Schwangenberg. I'm a security engineer here at Lookout, and I'd like to welcome Anvesh, my colleague. So Anvesh, if you give a little introduction of yourself.
Thanks, Sasha, for having me. Hello, everybody. My name is Anvesh Reddy. I'm one of the security engineers at Lookout for the SASE product portfolio.
Thanks, Anvesh. Yeah, so let's start with a quick agenda introduction. Yeah, so I will start what is Lookout, who is Lookout, where we started, and what we did today. Then we like to show you some cloud security statistics. So what we collected some statistics around threats in general, some statistics around mobile security, and some statistics around data loss. Yeah, then what is SASE? Just a quick introduction, which components are part of it, why organizations using data loss prevention or should use DLP, maybe easier to say for the future, and then gain visibility with Lookout Security Cloud, and lastly, Anvesh will run a CASB demo for you. Yeah, overall it will take around about 50 minutes maybe. So let's see, let's start now. Yeah, so let's start with the Lookout security graph and who is Lookout. So Lookout was founded 2007 as a mobile security company. It was dedicated to build security for mobile devices. We started for sure with Symbian and Windows Mobile back in the days. Then we straight away went to Android and iOS when it was released by Apple. We found in the initial days that companies didn't take care of vulnerability management, for example, on Nokia devices for sure was one example. So what our founders did was they attacked or they proved with an attack that devices running Symbian on a Nokia devices, they are able to attack them with a Bluetooth sniper rifle and get the contacts from the celebrities on the red carpet on the Oscars ceremony. So that was one proof to show, okay, there's a security hole in the whole operating system, and Nokia was not able to fix them because there was no vulnerability management present. As you see today, over-the-air updates are everywhere, and vulnerability management is one big topic. Vendors doing quite a good job, I would say, but quite often we see that companies didn't do a great job in doing vulnerability management. So that means a lot of devices are still out there running old systems or operating systems or outdated patch levels, and that would be one of the starting points if you like to have a higher security for devices. Yeah, the Lookout security graph in general, we preloaded Lookout Consumer Edition a lot with carriers out there. One example here in Germany is Deutsche Telekom, so they preloaded Lookout to their devices, and we reached through that process and through other processes more than 200 million devices. And this is a unique capability because we have the biggest data set out there. With those more than 200 million devices, and the same process we started quite early with nowadays more than 150 million apps. So what we did, we acquire apps from the official stores, Google Play, Apple App Store, every web resource. So web crawlers is one example. And even on mobile devices, we are able to do binary acquisition processes. So that means if you are maybe the only one in the world are targeted by maybe a dedicated attack against you, Lookout for Work or Lookout Consumer is able to do a binary acquisition. So get the binary and yeah, our AI machine learning process can start building coverage for new families out there. Yeah, so let's move to the Lookout security platform. So the platform describes all of the capabilities that we have. On the left side, it's mobile oriented. So with our MES product, what that includes is endpoint detection and response. So stuff like root and jailbreak detection, yeah, malware detection in general on devices, vulnerability and patch management. I discussed that already. Risk and compliance, phishing and content protection, one of the most prominent attack vectors out there. Yeah, so with users working from everywhere, it's the easiest way for hackers to attack someone is through phishing and content through a phishing attack. Yeah, so prominent attacks here are maybe the WhatsApp campaign that we saw. So people receiving just an incoming VoIP call or incoming GIF image, or it could be a social engineered SMS, whatever it is, but it's the easiest way to attack someone. Yeah, secure web gateway is one component, and then everything around SASE, user and entity behavior analytics, zero trust network access to get access to your on-premise products, cloud access security broker. That means providing security for your cloud services with inline and API based connections, digital rights management, and DLP, what we will cover quite extensively in today's webinar. Yeah, yeah. So what's the mission? It's all about data today. So what you have to make sure is keeping your data secure, no matter where it's stored. So it could be, yeah, your cloud. It could be your on-premise server. That's the main goal, is to keep your data secure, maybe encrypted, maybe compliant with regulations. So Lookout has more than 1,000 capabilities to do something with your data and make sure it's compliant with your regulations. Yeah, one important piece is respecting the end user's privacy, that they don't feel spied on, and have a good feeling if they work with the data you are providing or they will creating. And yeah, one important piece as well is to make sure that you are reducing the cost and complexity that is maybe currently existing. Yeah, the challenge is that you no longer have control. Why is that the case? So if we maybe looking back 10 years ago, everyone was using, yeah, it's called a perimeter. Why? Yeah, you build your own castle and everything was inside of this. The employees working in buildings, in company buildings, you're using on-premise services with servers that are part of the perimeter. So everything was protected against an attack from outside of the perimeter. That changed dramatically, especially when the COVID pandemic hit us, and now people are working from everywhere. So that's not the case anymore. Also with mobile devices and with yeah other device types, the perimeter is, I would say, nearly gone. For sure, there are still some services running in a perimeter, but everyone is using O365, Google Workspace, whatever it could be. So SaaS services are, I would say, at least prominent or even dominant nowadays. Yeah, a patchwork of apps. What that means is that we are running SaaS services and even yeah, call legacy apps. Yeah, just for business purposes, they are still out there, and currently it's maybe the stage where companies are shifting them as well to SaaS services, also to reduce cost, to make the life of the employees easier with better end user experience. Devices and networks aren't in control. People are working from home. That means they're not part of the network that you created with a proxy, with some controls in it and security. So they're just using their personal Wi-Fi, whatever that could be. It could be just their mobile devices using tethering. It could be maybe a little Fritzbox, whatever it is, and you have no control over that. And lastly, employees are using unapproved software. What is that? It could be stuff like WhatsApp or Telegram that will leak data, like contacts. Everyone that is using WhatsApp or starting WhatsApp initially will receive push notification. Can I get access to your contacts? If the end users say yes, the contacts are gone, are leaked to cloud service. Stuff like that, and even it's called shadow IT. So if you say, okay, my approved cloud service is O365, they can even maybe use Box or Dropbox, whatever it is, to share and collaborate with their data. So you're definitely limited with the existing tools. What it means, using VPNs, for an example. VPNs are, I would say, a dinosaur technique or technology. Why? They're designed to grant access to a perimeter. So if you have the castle that is protected and you want to grant someone access to that castle, that was the purpose of introducing a VPN technology. What is the issue with maybe VPN technologies? They have latency in connection. They're slowing apps, maybe because it's an always on VPN and you like to use VoIP services. VoIP services are normally using UDP transfer protocols, and they're quite often not supported within a VPN. That means you fall back to a TCP connection, and the end user experience on a web stream or on a webinar is terrible, and that could be related to your VPN technology. And that's the reason why you have to buy tools for the new requirements, and that's one issue, because you have your old tools, you buy new tools, and they are quite often edge or point solutions, and they don't work together. So they have no integration to each other. The administrators have multiple consoles for it, and the end users have multiple end user products, end user tools. So that's the issue with deploying zero trust tools, or with tools that don't have any correlation to each other. So what we did, we collected some statistics to show you the risk that is out there and what happens every day. 36% of every organization has leaked or suffered a serious cloud leak or breach in the last year. So 36%, I would say, is a really high number. And now let's break that down, where they're coming from. 80% of those organizations or those breaches are attacked by a vulnerability in cloud services, or even on-premise or endpoint vulnerabilities. So I said that initially, make sure that you do a great job on vulnerability management, not just on your servers, do it as well on your endpoints. So that means PCs, Macs, Android devices, iOS devices, that those 80% can be lowered to a really low number, because vendors out there do a great job in doing patch management today. but it's yeah, about the administrators to succeed and to force the end users that they are doing updates and being out of compliant if they will not start the update process within a couple of days, for example. Yeah, 47% of security professionals say they need better visibility into their cloud environment. What is that? If I share data, if I work together on cloud data, yeah, it could be encryption. So if I share something sensitive, yeah, the visibility is gone. I have no clue who shared which document with which recipient. So this is one thing on the 47%. And then lastly, we have two numbers here. 24.5% of mobile devices are affected in general with threats, but 40.2% encountered a phishing attack. So here, I'm living in Germany. I received a lot of phishing attempts through SMS in the past weeks. They're always related to some parcels I should receive, like tracking links, or click here to define a new day, or make sure that the parcel is on the right spot, or it stays here, something around that. And they're using services like DHL or Hermes or whatever it could be here in Germany to drive attention on that. And yeah, that's one way, or the easiest way to attack someone is through phishing. And that number, I would say, proves that, because 40% is a really high number. Yeah, so let's explain in a couple of words what is SASE. SASE is the terminology or a word created by Gartner, an analyst firm, and it contains a lot of, I would say, security products related to cloud services. So one big portion of that is CASB. CASB is cloud access security brokers that will apply to your cloud services. And another component is zero trust network access. That is the part for your on-premise web application, or web applications, for example, to make them accessibly secure, like you maybe did before with a VPN approach. Secure web gateway, and lastly, data loss prevention. For sure, all these components will work together in the SASE world. Yeah, so CASB including DLP and maybe including the encryption is just one component in the end for the end user, but in the terminology SASE, they are yeah, separated from each other. Yeah, what are the most prevalent risks to your organization's data? Ransomware attacks, for sure, all of us know them. They are, I would say, quite dominant in the press. Data leakage via collaboration. Yeah, visibility, we mentioned that as well. What happens with the data if you share it with someone? Is it an internal employee? Is it someone externally, maybe from a partner? What happens with the data? And yeah, gaining visibility into that is one piece where you can reduce that risk. Insider threats and compromised accounts. Compromised accounts and devices is also quite often related to phishing attacks. So if I would be a hacker, I would start sending you a phishing link, and I will try to compromise the device, maybe with a root. If that is not successfully because your device is fully patched and the vulnerability management was done correctly, then I try maybe to just compromise the account through a credential theft. Yeah, so that's the risk here. Yeah, let's continue with some other examples. So I found a quite interesting number here. 4.4, 1 million is the average cost of a data breach in the United States. And yeah, that's a really high and scary number, I would say. And that is part of a report we found out there. Cost of data breach from IBM is the resource. So if you are interested even more in that number, yeah, you can have a read through. What is the part of the data breach, or what includes in a data breach, is highlighted here. So just a few examples. Yeah, passport numbers are included, credit card informations, medical patient records, user credentials, including IDs and passwords, social security numbers, email and contact information. Everything here is, I would say, PII related, contains sensitive data, and is mostly a nightmare for the companies that are affected by those data losses. It's normally not just internal data, it's even data from customers. So they have to make it public. They have to pay a fee, and yeah, it's a long process to get away from the data loss, to make sure your reputation is good again, and there are many processes around the data loss. Just a couple of companies that are affected on the right side. So I'm sure you know a lot of them. Yeah, so let's talk about DLP and a CASB comparison. Yeah, so if you start with a cloud services, it normally didn't include any DLP or CASB functionalities. Yeah, it's the initial way to start with that, and then maybe you like to introduce DLP and even CASB. So yeah, what's missing? For sure, no data classification to detect and catalog sensitive information wherever it lives. That is the, I would say, first and most important piece when it comes to DLP and CASB. Data scanning, so you have to make sure that structured and unstructured data is scanned. Yeah, visualization of the data. Yeah, wherever it is on the users or device contacts, how he's handling with that data. Even stuff like OCR scanning, so identify, classify, and protect sensitive data in a format like maybe a picture or PDF. That is something you can reach through CASB. Also even scanning historical data and real-time sets. So historical is the data that is already present before you introduce a service with or protecting a service with CASB and DLP. And real-time data is the data that is created after that. So on uploading, downloading, or creating new data sets. Yeah, I would say this is most important on that slide. If there are any upcoming questions, we are always happy to support you and explain that even further, for sure. Yeah, why organizations using CASB and DLP? Yeah, so Anvesh, maybe just one question that came to my mind or was present quite often back in the days. So what do you think threat actors have evolved their tactics recently such that DLP is so important to have in place here?
Yeah, great question, Sasha. So we've been witnessing how threat actors have continued to explore every crack in the digital world. And when it comes to cloud applications, especially, invariably they start with either a credential theft or a phishing attack or exploiting some compromised credentials. And this is how data gets stolen from backdoors. So now DLP is a very effective tool. It's not just for governance and compliance, but even for data security. And if I have to go to a couple of examples, organizations and employees, they download data from the clouds into personal devices, and it's easy to share data from these cloud applications to external users. So this is where DLP can come in, examine the sensitive data, and take that remediation action to ensure that the data is not lost or data is not breached. So DLP is a very, very effective solution for that.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so a couple of more examples, but Anvesh explained that quite good already. So why organizations using DLP? For sure, discover, classify, and protect PI and sensitive data. Yeah, so what happens with that? You like to gain visibility. If you have a large and distributed organizations, many people work from everywhere, so it's definitely just more distributed than it was. Compliance things like PCI, HIPAA, GDPR things, collaboration, you like to enforce or restrict people from doing something. Maybe, yeah, they sometimes sharing sensitive data with externals and they are not aware of it, or it will stay forever and is accessible to the outside world, not even maybe just for a couple of minutes because someone didn't have any cloud account, but it stays there forever. So more rules and strict enforcements around that, and productivity. So you like to give end users the access even on BYO or unmanaged devices. Yeah, so if we make that maybe even more visible, I would say that was a great example how it looks at a lot of infrastructures out there. So what companies did, they starting with their house or with their main service, and then they're extending that with point solutions. And what is the pain of it, or what is the challenge with it? Even if you have the best point solution, it will not communicate and integrate to the other services. And yeah, you have to use multiple logins, multiple credentials. There's no built-in security to one and the other service. So yeah, maybe that explains that better than every word. If you have a look at the picture, this is the reality out there. Yeah, I would now have another question to Anvesh. Maybe talk about encryption, and when people talk about DLP, what do you think? How does that play into it, and especially on platforms like O365 and Google Workspace?
Yeah, definitely. And encryption definitely plays a big role in the overall solution, like DLP. There's only so much you can do with access controls and authorization. It works for infrastructure and applications, but not so well for the data itself. Once you download data or share data, it has its own life, basically, right? So that's where encryption can come in and give the control back to enterprises. And the nature of the encryption should be in such a way that organizations can still collaborate while protecting their sensitive assets. So it definitely plays a very big role.
Yeah, thanks. And this is yeah, my last slide before we start into the demo. But it shows how an advanced data loss prevention concept looks like. So there's a unified policy console. Then Lookout DLP got applied to every service that we are using. And this includes yeah, advanced contextual policies based on cloud device and risk activity content. It can apply content rules. So we have out of the box more than 1,000 compliance rules, and cloud native DLP. That means support for API and inline protection. Yeah, policy actions, just to name a few of them. It could be block, it could be coach, it could be maybe a step-out authentication when you think the end users maybe in a risky scenario that a second or a third factor will get introduced to make sure it is the end user and the employee that should use that service and not a hacker. It could be watermarking sensitive data to say, okay, everyone is aware that he's now working with sensitive informations and multiple others. Yeah, so I would hand it over to Anvesh for the demo.
Thanks, Sasha. So as part of this demonstration, we're going to look at the visibility aspects of the Lookout CASP platform and how it helps organizations get visibility into the overall cloud usage, for example. How can organizations enable controls to their sanctioned applications with zero trust principles? And we'll also look at some use cases around DLP, data classification, and the EDRM technology for encryption, as well as some threat prevention capabilities that the Lookout CASP platform brings to the table. Okay, so if we actually start off, the CASP market started a few years ago trying to solve the shadow IT problem. So what you're looking at is the shadow IT dashboard of the Lookout CASP platform, which is a result of the cloud discovery process. And it gives a high-level risk status overview of the overall cloud usage, and also categorizes the applications depending on the kind of service they provide or the industry they belong to. And if we actually go into a little more detail, it's not just about getting visibility into the clouds that are being used. It's also important to know how much data is being exchanged with these cloud applications. Gives a sense to the organization if sensitive data is leaking into these unsanctioned apps. And more importantly, every cloud app that's discovered is assigned with a risk score. And this risk score is calculated taking into account multiple attributes, and they are broadly categorized into 4 areas, which is environment, compliance, privacy, and security. Within each of these categories, there are multiple sub-attributes. For example, in compliance, you look at ISO 27001 as a standard, and all these are taken into account, and a risk score is assigned to each application, 1 being the least risk and 10 being the highest. And once the clouds are discovered and the risk is understood, organizations can now think about blocking certain risky unsanctioned applications. And from the Lookout CASP console, organizations can generate access control lists and feed that into their enterprise web proxies and do the actual blocking there. Also, within the shadow IT discovery process, it's equally important to understand the users who are using these unsanctioned apps and how much data they're exchanging with these applications. And administrators can obviously get a nice little report from the console in terms of the overall cloud usage, and there is a neat executive summary highlighting the applications and the categories they belong to. So at this stage, the organization has some visibility into the overall cloud usage. They can now start to think about the controls they want to put in for their sanctioned clouds. And for this demonstration, we'll take Office 365 as an example. It starts off with a simple onboarding process, and within the Office suite, organizations can choose to protect individual applications like OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, etc. And this is a layered protection model that the platform brings, and each of these protection models directly or indirectly contribute to enabling DLP for sensitive data. And we're going to look at use cases that fall into each of these protection models as we move forward. So once the organization onboards the application to the platform, immediately they start to realize the benefit of it in the form of getting deep visibility into the activities that are happening within this sanctioned Office application. Right from top 5 downloaded files, for example, from a content standpoint, or from a device or an operating system standpoint, organizations can understand what kind of devices users are using to access the application. And even in terms of geographic location, login activities, and any content shares happening, organizations can start to understand the trends and how users are actually using the system, which is very powerful. So organizations now have deep visibility into the overall usage. And now they can start to think about what about the controls that they can put in to this Office application. And this is where the zero trust principles come in with context checking. So let's take an example here. This is a low risk user trying to access the Office application from a managed device. And as you saw, the integration with the Okta platform or the single sign-on platform comes in, and the platform, the CASB platform, is checking the context and then allowing the user, according to policy, to access the sanctioned Office application. And a single policy can be extended to multiple clouds. And in this use case here, you're seeing the same user trying to access the sanctioned Box application, for example, goes through the same authentication process and is able to access the application because he or she is coming from the right context. Right. So let's take an example of a situation where a high-risk user is trying to access the same sanctioned applications from their personal devices. And again, the same integration with the IAM platform comes in. And as the user authenticates, the CASB platform checks the context, sees that it's a high-risk user, and also sees that it's a personal device, it's an unmanaged device. Then, according to the policy, it's blocking the access to the Office application. And as I mentioned before, a single policy can be extended to multiple clouds. There's no requirement to have multiple policies to achieve this for multiple clouds. And in this use case here, you will see that the same high-risk user trying to access the Box application is denied access because the high-risk user and the device is a personal device. So this way, organizations can start to put login access controls. And if we're actually talking about mobile devices, in this use case here, we're checking the context of the device operating system and also the fact that it's a personal device. So in this use case here, this iPhone is my personal device, and this user is trying to access Box from the mobile device, and we can deny access from mobile devices completely, taking into account the operating system if they are personal. Right. So these are a few examples of login access controls. So this is the first level. So once the user is given access to these cloud applications, now they start to interact with them by, let's say, uploading data or downloading data to these applications. And in this use case, let's say an employee is uploading a medical record to Box and is trying to, let's say, now download the same document to the managed device. So this is one of the policy actions that organizations can take to basically coach users when someone is trying to download sensitive data to, let's say, managed or unmanaged devices. And this justification that user is providing can be tracked in the activity audit logs by the administrators to understand why users are uploading or downloading sensitive information to these clouds. And if we actually look at the document itself, the reason this triggered the policy is that this document contains some PII data in the form of, let's say, social security numbers. And that is the reason why the user coaching was triggered by policy when the download attempt was done. So let's take an example of an employee doing certain activity in SharePoint. This time to a particular site, the employee is uploading a document which is classified by Microsoft's AIP platform or MIP platform as confidential. So this time, the CASP platform, the Lookout CASP platform, is checking for the classification that's there on the document. And while the upload is allowed to the sanctioned SharePoint application, when the download is attempted to let's say a managed device, this time we want to trigger encryption on download, right? So when the download is complete, before it reaches the endpoint, we are applying encryption to the document. That's an option that organizations can take when users are downloading sensitive documents. And this encryption is combined with rights management, and the decryption of the document is again controlled by an authentication process. There is a lightweight decryption client that's available for all the major platforms that employees and users can use. And only after a successful authentication and authorization, according to the policies, the user will be allowed to decrypt the document and use the contents inside it. So this decryption process is also a controlled one, and organizations can have policies to restrict it to certain users. Well, let's take an example of the same download activities, but this time they're happening from a personal device or an unmanaged device. So the employee tries to download the same medical record to an unmanaged device. So this time we are triggering step-up authentication. So this is where integration with MFA platforms comes in. And only after a successful validation of, let's say, a security question or a passcode, the download is allowed. And even when the download is allowed, you can choose to protect the document before it reaches the endpoint in the form of encryption. Right? In certain cases, you may not even want to allow downloads to happen to personal or unmanaged devices. And in this use case, the user is trying to download a confidential document to the personal device, and there is a policy which will prevent the download from happening completely to the personal device. So these are a couple of examples of how we are taking into account the context and also the content, and taking necessary steps to prevent data leakage. So if we actually dive a little deep into the encryption capabilities that the Lookout CASP platform brings, because of the fact that it's got rights management embedded into it, there are certain controls that organizations can put in terms of content expiration. You can choose to set the expiry to, let's say, a week or 15 days, and after that, the document is not usable. And more importantly, this style of encryption is collaboration friendly. So let's say an organization has SAP SuccessFactors as their cloud, and they want to share a report to their payroll provider, which is an external party. They can do so using the encryption technology in a secure fashion by defining rules on who can actually decrypt the documents and work with it. So this is a really a powerful way of collaboration in a secure way with external parties, while having full control over data. Now, while it's important to secure data in the web channel, I personally believe that data can leak very easily in the form of emails. It's just a simple case of adding an unauthorized recipient to the email. And let's say in this use case, I'm trying to send a medical record copy or a snapshot in the form of an image, which contains some PII data. So in this email, I have an internal recipient, have two external recipients in it, and there is some sensitive data in the attachment. When the email is received by the internal user, you'll actually notice that first of all, the platform is able to recognize the image and sensitive data in it using optical character recognition, and it's able to apply encryption. And secondly, it removes the unauthorized Gmail recipient from the CC list and only allows authorized recipients. It can be even external, depending on the policy that is configured. Right, and another important use case when it comes to collaboration from platforms like SharePoint or OneDrive, it's easy to right-click on a document and say share it to anyone outside the organization, right? So it's easy to define a bunch of email addresses who are external users or partners. And it's important to get visibility into the and ensure the data is not being shared to unauthorized recipients. So in this use case, I've shared it to Alex Wilbur, who is an authorized external recipient, but I've also shared it to my Gmail address, which is not an authorized recipient. And there is a policy in the platform which says that if a document containing PII data is being shared externally, I would want to allow only that share to exist only to the authorized third-party recipient, which is Alex Wilbur, and I want to remove the collaborator on the Gmail or the personal email addresses. So as you can see, when the policy takes the action, you notice that it's only Alex Wilbur that continues to have access to the document, whereas my personal Gmail address is removed from the collaborator list. So this is again a very important use case when it comes to collaboration platforms to ensure that data is not shared. There's no excessive sharing of data to unauthorized recipients. Now, in terms of threat prevention, which indirectly contributes to data loss prevention, the Lookout CASP platform has an antivirus and anti-malware engine. As users upload documents, there's continuous scanning of data. And if the platform finds any infectious files, we can completely deny the upload from happening to the cloud, in turn protecting the assets in the cloud. And when we talk about threat prevention, outside the traditional antivirus and anti-malware checks, we can also integrate, the platform also integrates with third-party threat providers in the form of, let's say, FireEye detection on demand to detect those zero-day vulnerabilities. Now, while it's important to check that, it's also important to understand user behavior and detect any threats that may result in deviations in user behavior. So this is an example of a geolocation anomaly. This is basically driven by the user entity and behavioral analytics out of the platform. So a certain activity has happened in a certain geographic location, and within an hour, there's been another activity from, let's say, 8,000 miles away. So this is impossible to happen for the same user to be in two different locations in such a short span of time. It's a geolocation anomaly, and it could indicate a credential compromise threat, and the platform is able to detect and send off alerts to the administrators. And in terms of the content, anomalous downloads by size is basically to check any data exfiltration attempts that are happening, any large number of downloads which are not normal for that particular user. And another type of anomaly that the platform looks for is anomalous content deletes. These are signatures of ransomware attacks, where there are mass renames or mass deletes happening in the cloud, and the platform is able to detect and alert the administrators. So in the beginning of the demonstration, we looked at a use case where we looked at the user risk as a context, and the factors that are contributing to calculating the user risk is the number of DLP violations, the malware count, and the anomalies that they generate over time, and that contributes to the user risk. So from a compliance standpoint, there is an important piece in the platform called Insights Investigate. First of all, organizations can manage all the violations in the form of incidents. And secondly, and more importantly, what this Insights Investigate gives is it gives the opportunity for the organizations to track, let's say, movement of a sensitive piece of information across the cloud landscape. Right. So in this use case, I want to understand a particular document's movement across my cloud landscape and who are all the users who've been acting on it for the last 1 month. With just a couple of clicks, the organization is able to understand the users who've acted on it and from which geographic locations the document was downloaded to or uploaded from. And in terms of applications, what are the sanctioned applications the document was put into? And in terms of collaboration, if this document was shared to any external users in that time period. So it's a really powerful tool to understand the different contexts surrounding a particular entity. And the foundation for this, as you can see here, is the fact that we are auditing every activity that the users perform in the cloud applications. And all those activities are presented in the console in the activity audit logs page. And finally, from a reporting standpoint, again, there's plenty of options in terms of what kind of reports organizations would want to schedule, and these can be scheduled as an on-demand or a schedule for a fortnightly or a monthly report. And in terms of the types of reports, we'll look at an example of a compliance report for Office 365, and the amount of detail that the report provides to understand the overall cloud usage within the organization. So policy hits over time is one metric that you can track, and who are all the users who are generating the most number of violations? What are the policy remediation actions taken as a result of these violations? So all this information can be consolidated into a report, and they can be scheduled to be sent to the right recipients within the organization to get complete visibility into the cloud usage. So to conclude, the combination of contextual login access controls combined with data loss prevention and data protection in the form of EDRM-based encryption technology and threat prevention can give organizations that comprehensive cloud security strategy. Thank you. Back to you, Sasha.
Thank you, Anish. Yeah, so I would like to thank you for your attendance. I hope you found it interesting today. If you have any upcoming questions, if you'd like to have a meeting together with us, we're happy to support you on that. And yeah, thanks for attending today.